In ancient times, there was a Gubu Ziqing who was good at reading people's faces, and in today's world, a man named Tang Jiu appeared in Liang. They were both able to discern people's fortune and misfortune by observing their appearance and facial color. So people in the world were very praised for their face reading skills. But people in ancient times did not engage in such things, and learned people did not care to talk about such things. Therefore, it is better to observe a person's face than to examine his mind. And to examine his mind than to identify his way of dealing with the world and establishing oneself. The reason is that appearance is not as important as thought, and thought is not as important as the actual way of dealing with the world. If the way of dealing with the world is correct and there is a thought that corresponds to it, then even if his appearance is ugly, it will not damage his image as a gentleman. If his appearance is beautiful but his thought and way of dealing with the world are very ugly, it will not cover his face as a villain. Therefore, if you are a gentleman, you will get good fortune, but if you are a villain, you will not get good fortune. Therefore, no matter how tall or short, how big or small, how beautiful or ugly, and other physical features of appearance are not the criteria for judging good or bad luck. Therefore, people in ancient times did not engage in such things, and learned people did not bother to talk about such things. There are three kinds of ominous things in a person's life: the young will not serve the old, the lowly will not serve the noble, and the untalented will not serve the virtuous. There are three situations in which a person can get into trouble: a ruler who cannot love his subjects, and a subject who likes to talk about the shortcomings of the ruler, which is the first situation that makes a person get into trouble. A person who cannot obey the other person to his face and slanders the other person behind his back, which is the second situation that makes a person get into trouble. A person who has not accumulated a lot of knowledge, has not cultivated a high character, and has a disparity in the ability to judge right and wrong with others, but cannot respect a person who is benevolent. This is the third situation in which a person is trapped in a difficult situation. If a person has one of these three conditions, the ruler will surely face danger, and the subject will surely face the end of destruction. What is it that makes people human? The answer is that man is able to distinguish the boundaries of various things. When one is hungry, one thinks of eating; when one is cold, one thinks of warming; when one is tired, one thinks of resting; when one prefers to gain, one hates to be hurt. These are the instincts that one is born with, these are the abilities that one does not need to learn through the day. But what makes people human is not just that they have 2 feet and no hair on their bodies, but that they can distinguish the boundaries of various things. Now the orangutan looks very much like man, and also has 2 feet and no hair on his face, but the gentleman can eat their meat and drink their meat soup. So, man is a man not just because he has 2 feet and no hair on his body, but because he has the ability to discern the boundaries of various things. Among animals, there is also a father-son relationship, but there is no affection between father and son. And there is a distinction between male and female, but there is no ability to distinguish the boundaries between men and women. So the social moral code that dominates human society gives man the ability to discern the boundaries of all things. There is nothing more important than to distinguish the boundaries of various things than to determine the names of various things, and there is nothing more important than to follow the rules of propriety. And there is nothing more important than to follow the rules of propriety than to follow the example of a wise emperor. There are hundreds of such emperors. Who should we emulate? The answer is that the ancient ritual system has been lost in time. The rhythm of music has been lost, and the officials in charge of the rituals and laws are so old that the current rituals and laws are out of touch with the ancient ones. Therefore, if you want to know the deeds of the wise emperors, you have to ask the people who understand the details, that is, the way the future kings ruled the country. The so-called descendant emperors are the kings who rule the world today. And to give up the descendant kings and praise the ancient kings is like giving up one's own king to serve another king instead. So it is said, to understand clearly the story of 1,000 years ago, one must examine the present carefully. To understand clearly the billions of things, one must start from one or two things. To understand the social situation in the ancient times, one must start from examining the way the Zhou dynasty rules today, and to understand the way the Zhou dynasty rules, one must examine their respectful attitude toward the monarchs. That is why it is said, to build up an understanding of the distant past according to the present day, to build up an understanding of tens of thousands of things from one thing, and to build up an understanding of the visible things from the obscure and minute things. This is what is said. The difficulty that lobbying can encounter is that it is impossible to directly achieve the purpose of lobbying by bringing a lofty state of mind to those who are mean at heart, and by lobbying the last king with the best method of governing the country. Lobbying with ancient examples may be unrealistic due to fallacies, and explaining with recent examples may be unacceptable due to vulgarity. A person who is good at lobbying takes the path between the two, and does not make mistakes when citing ancient examples, and does not become vulgar when using modern examples, and lets the words of lobbying change with the times and world events, whether they need to be slow or hasty, whether they need to say more or less, depending on the actual needs. Just like controlling the flow of water with a dam or correcting bamboo with a tool, and using euphemisms as much as possible to tell the other party what he means. We should use euphemisms as much as possible to tell the other person what we mean without hurting him. Therefore, a gentleman is as strict with himself as a carpenter is with his ink line to make it straight, and as a boatman is with his boat to receive guests. He demands himself like a carpenter who uses ink and string to make things straight, so that he can be emulated by everyone in the world. By treating people with the same mind as a boatman, he can be tolerant of others and rely on their strength to govern the world. Therefore, a gentleman is a person who is wise and can tolerate the incompetent. A person who is wise and can tolerate the ignorant, a person who is knowledgeable and can tolerate the ignorant, and a person who is moral and can tolerate people of mixed character.